Opening slide, graphic text. Title, Neighbourhood Connect, Turning Streets into Communities, with Irene Opper and Rebecca Feldman. Logos, Neighbourhood Connect, Belonging Matters, Talks That Matter. Irene Opper, National Manager, Neighbourhood Connect.
When we think about our society, there's been changes over the years, and what we have now is not a lot of social connection happening naturally, especially in cities. What we've got is that people are moving on average of every 6 years. So just when they've made some connections, they move. What we've got is smaller family sizes, and many of us will know that when you have young children, you do make a lot of connections. But if you're having less children, that's happening less. And then once they're in high school, that pretty much doesn't happen much anymore either. We also have people that don't have any children. So some of these natural points of connection are happening less and less. People are driving cars more, which means that they're not walking as much. COVID might have changed this a bit, but generally we've had a trend of more car ownership and less people walking around where they can have those chats and get to know people. We have a very connected society online, so we're all checking our smartphones and using technology. And while that brings us connections that might be even in other countries, which is a positive thing, it can mean we have less connections locally. And we've also all seen where having those online options actually takes away from the real life connection. So we've all seen people in a restaurant where they're all on their phones instead of talking to each other. So these are some of the trends that have happened that have made it less likely that you're going to have community around you naturally than it would have been for your parents or grandparents. There's also cultural differences where in other cultures it's a lot more common and happens naturally. And in Australian culture, it's not happening naturally. Of course, there's pockets of great stuff happening, but it's not universally there for all of us to just tap into when we want to. So Neighbourhood Connect came about in realising that we actually have to create it. It's a lot of research that's been done in this area, and probably you've all seen some of it. But the research has proven that social connections actually are amazing for our health and our well-being. It makes a huge difference when we have a sense of community and belonging. And on the other side, the research has proven that when we don't have it, we are much more likely to suffer things like isolation, depression, anxiety, even suicide. So there's a lot of harm associated with being isolated, and not having social connections is as bad for you as heavy smoking and obesity. So it's really significant how much it can help affect our well-being. The research also shows us that 1 in 4 of us feel lonely. And with COVID, I actually have seen a study that says it's 1 in 2 of us. So there's a real, some people have called an epidemic where people are feeling lonely and isolated, and some of that's the lockdown. So we've had some sort of, it's been harder to maintain our connections, and we've had to find different ways. Now, a lot of people are living alone. And that again makes it harder to have those connections. There's a lot of disrupted families, a lot more divorce, etc. So all of these things have been going on, and a lot of research has been going into it, but not enough has been done about fixing it. So we've kind of looked at what's enough to give people that they can then go and create a neighbours group. So that's what we felt was the solution, that to actually deliberately create connections in your neighbourhood. Now, we believe they are much better when they're done in real life. So there's a lot of ways we can connect online with people. There's a lot of Facebook pages for a suburb, and they're all good, and there's Nextdoor, and there's a lot of good things that give you some level of connection, and that's great. But what we found is if you want a deeper level connection, it's really about meeting people face to face and and meeting them several times, like ongoingly meeting them to develop that connection. So what we've done is we thought, right, well, what people need is confidence, they need skills, they need tools. So I will just share, some information with you. This is our process. We've tried to make it as simple as possible. So it starts with a person wanting to connect with their neighbours. So that can be anyone, anyone who simply wants connection. They don't need to know how, they don't need to feel confident, they just need to want to develop a sense of community. So often they'll come to a webinar of ours where we'll talk them through and explain how to go about it. But basically they invite their neighbours to connect. So they give an invitation, and they do that either by knocking on doors and explaining that they'd love to meet the people that live around them, that they personally live in the next, they might be 1 or 2 streets over. So we're not meaning literally just those few neighbours right near you, but maybe a few streets around you, up to a 5-minute walk. So that connector invites their neighbours through a door knock or putting it in the letterbox. And then you have informal gatherings, preferably in person when you can. Now, during COVID, of course, we developed something called Happy Hour online. So there are ways to meet your neighbours online, but we don't get as many people coming along to that as we do when it's a face-to-face thing. So you do simple, regular things, and what you get out of that is you get strong relationships forming. And when people have those strong relationships with the people that live around them, they get the sense of community, the sense of belonging. People will feel happier for that. They really notice that well-being improvement. They feel safer because they know there are people who know them and they're looking out for them. And people will ring up their neighbour and say, look, I saw someone in your yard, and you know, they will help each other that way. They'll bring in the bin for a neighbour if they haven't done it for themselves. And they're definitely much more supported. So when you know people are automatically helping one another in many ways, and they automatically know who to look in on. So say, for example, you know, when we had the earthquake recently, if we happen to know our neighbours and we happen to know that you know, some of them get really anxious, we'd go and check in on them after something like that because we know them and we know what they need. So this builds natural relationships. And there's a great researcher called Johann Hari, some of you might have heard of. He wrote a brilliant book called Lost Connections. And it says that it's the naturally given friendships and connections that you have that make the most difference to our quality of life. So, and that's what you get from neighbour groups. So what we do is we give tools like an invitation. So we're trying to make it friendly. We've got a picture that's showing all sorts of people, and it says everyone is welcome. And I think that's really important. And we have had all manner of people coming along, all cultures, all political persuasions, all types. Everyone comes along because we make that really clear. And it's an invitation from one neighbour to another. And the gathering might be in a park, it might be in a home, it might be in a local restaurant or cafe. So something simple. And bring a plate so no one has to worry about catering or cooking, anything like that. What comes out of this, what we get is a massive increase in the number of connections that people have. So when we asked our connectors, how many neighbours did you know before you did this? They knew only an average of 8 beforehand. Now, within 3 to 6 months, they now know an average of 57 neighbours. That's a massive increase, and that would not happen in an entire lifetime if you wait for it to happen naturally. So this really was a turbocharging your local connections. We also asked the neighbours if they were lonely before they started a neighbours group, what are they feeling now? And 80% of them said that they're less lonely now. Some of the connectors were never lonely, But of those that were feeling that, it's made a big difference. Most of them, 73%, are now more involved in local issues because they've met others around them and they've had those discussions. And most of them, 80%, are helping their neighbours at least monthly. So all of that comes out of it. And we compared with Hilda and other big studies, and we found that connectors have a greater sense of community, greater life satisfaction, and social support. So now I'd like to share a little bit about what it's like, the groups. So some of these groups here are all about outside activities because they're in areas where there's lots of children. So they might do cleanups, they might have, celebrations in the park. The middle picture is during isolation. Some of the neighbours performed and they were all sitting at a safe distance listening to the music, and they also live streamed it so other neighbours could hear it as well. They got Bunnings to donate all sorts of things, and they made a laneway into a beautiful space. So that's the sort of things that go on. They do bake-offs, they do progressive dinners, all sorts of things. This is my group. I'm in St Kilda in Melbourne. It's mostly middle-aged and older. So we tend to do, again, there's always some picnics or barbecues, but we will go to restaurants, try different ones every month. We will get the local art gallery to put on an event for us. The church has been helpful in letting us have the end-of-year event there. So these are all the fun social things, but just to give you an instance of the impact, one of the people in my neighbours group, she's got all her family in New Zealand, and she said she lost her job in the beginning of the first lockdown, and she's had the neighbours swing in and help. Some have bought the masks that she's made. One person's become her bubble buddy. Someone else gave her their house to have a holiday at her house when they went away during one time when things were open. And she said to us, "You guys are my family. I couldn't have got through without you." So while it's all about the positive and enjoying each other's company, the result is really quite life-changing. This other group I'll share about is in the Mornington Peninsula, where they're nearly all retired. And so they've had their gatherings in each other's homes. And over time, some of these groups have been going for quite a few years now. Over time, they had two of the women whose partners passed away. And so again, they swung in and they've been helping those women. And the feedback I've had is that they said they wouldn't have known how to have a social life without their husbands. They'd done it with them for 40 years and they were at a total loss. And because of the neighbours, they still socialise. They still have connections. They have help. The other men have just said, "Call me if you need a light globe change, anything you need, just call." So, and they helped another of their members move into a nursing home. So you can see how these connections, they have fun together, they share information, they go and do things together, which keeps you healthy and happy, but they really help when it's needed, when someone's unwell and the like. I'd now like to throw to Beck Fellman. Beck is a wonderful, wonderful woman who works for Belonging Matters, and she has been one of our connectors. So I will stop sharing this, and we'd love to hear from you, Beck, about your experience.
Thanks, Irene. I also volunteered for Neighbourhood Connect for a number of years, but amongst that had a neighbour group of my own. So it was reasonably small, but we had very kind of regular neighbours that would be involved in various things. So we generally met up monthly and had things like progressive dinners. We had some very good cooks in the group, which was fantastic. We went to a sustainability festival. We had movie nights. You just got some really nice social connections happening. I ended up with a really close friend of a very elderly neighbour just around the corner, and we were able to enjoy a year and a half of really beautiful intergenerational friendship before she passed. But it was also to kind of see so many neighbours turn up to her end of life party, which that was what she wanted to have for her funeral. And I guess it was because of that group that all those neighbours turned up. So 2 other neighbours, we attended their wedding, which again I don't think wouldn't have happened without those relationships that we had. We had someone else who was a bit of a hoarder, so another neighbour stepped in and with some permission helped her with some decluttering. We had produce swaps. We had Christmas celebrations, and I think it really reflecting on the difference it made. I've lived in a lot of different places. A Gen Y who's moved around a lot, and when I now reflect on sort of what was my favourite place, Bayswater is certainly one. And I think pre the neighbours group, I certainly wouldn't have been able to say that it was my favourite place because of all these relationships I had and these people I knew within a 5-minute walk. And it really gave me a sense of place and a sense of belonging, and it brought a suburb alive, and it became special because I mattered to people that were so close to me in that suburb. So I was, and Irene can attest to the fact that I was very, very nervous in having my first gathering. It took me well over 6 months to decide that, yes, this was something I was going to do. But, I'm extremely glad I did. And certainly if I was to move more permanently to somewhere, I think it would be definitely something that I would do again, just knowing what can come out of connecting with those around you. It's priceless, really.
Thanks, Beck. I'd echo that. I'm planning a move, and the first thing I'm going to do when I get there is start a neighbours group. I'm going to have connections so quickly, and that's a great thing. So what I like about it is its inclusivity, the cross generations. Everyone being welcome. And we've certainly had groups that have been led by people with disability, and we've also had groups where people with disability have come along as participants and been welcomed just the same as everyone else is welcomed. So it's a wonderful thing, and I'd recommend that you all make it happen in your area. And we do a free webinar every fortnight. So if you go, our website's neighbourhoodconnect.org.au, so you'll be able to read a bit more and just register for that. So I'd like to now ask what questions anyone has. Teresa.
Yeah, both of you alluded to the fact that you had helped to set one up and then you're moving on. I'm interested to know if they maintained themselves, those groups, after you both moved out of the neighbourhood. Did someone else take on that function of kind of coordinating or keeping it going?
Some of our groups end up lasting for many, many years. Others, if there isn't anyone to pick up the leadership, they can stop. So in my case where I am, I've actually got a large team of connectors. So whenever we find a connector, part of the support we give them is to find other connectors. So we really encourage that. So you've got a team of 2 to 4 people, because otherwise it's at huge risk of folding when the person leaves. So in my case, there's 6 of us as connectors. When I go, it's going to continue, no question, because there's 5 of them that'll keep it going. So that's lucky. But generally most areas will encourage that 2 to 4 people so that it's not resting on one person's shoulders. So we have, and that's been a learning. In the early days we didn't do that, and we had some groups that stopped meeting because of that, for the lack of someone to simply send out the invite. So it's a great question. Yep, Yaya?
Hi. Was just wondering, what's the biggest infrastructure change like that neighbors came together, that maybe involved council regulation, like maybe closing the street
Good
or
question.
something?
Okay, so our recommendation is to keep things simple. So if someone, and we do get connectors that approach us and say, look, I'd like to start with a street party. And I'd say, look, you can, but that's going to take you quite a while to plan. You will need to get permission. That's a bigger deal. So a variation on that is there a cul-de-sac where you can be on the footpath where you might only need to check with those 4 houses at the end of the street if they're okay with that. So that would be a compromise that still makes it really simple. Rather than a longer process. So the reason we suggest that is that if you do something complicated, you won't do it very often because it takes a lot of time and energy. So when you think about relationships, it's meeting the same people a number of times. So your priority is that frequency more than the most exciting event. So even having, a cuppa or a walk together more regularly is going to have better relationship outcomes than, an amazing event twice a year. Yeah, and there's a lot of great initiatives that don't do something just once a year. And, they're good, but they're not enough for community.
So if somebody's got an intellectual disability and they would like to start a neighbourhood group, have you got suggestions about how that might work? Would you get the support worker to help them, or how would that?
Yep. I think this is probably new territory. We'd have to work it out. So if they have a support worker or a family member or a friend or someone that is interested in being on that journey with them, that would be ideal. We don't have any core funding, so we don't have any. A lot of what we do is done voluntarily. So we don't have that support staff infrastructure. But, they can find a way, hopefully, if there's someone willing to support that journey with them. Yeah. I mean, the ideal for anyone is to find another connector before they start. That's ideal. So even if they know someone who lives near them who might want to do it with them.
Yeah, I was just thinking that actually, Irene, that, like 2 connectors pairing up together. So rather than making it sort of like a disability support type of thing, that there may be 2 or 3 people interested in being connected in the one group.
Yeah. Now, we want to keep this very, very local. So if they don't live within a 5-minute walk of each other, then they could do it in the sense of supporting each other, but they should be separate neighbour groups. You don't want to get it so dispersed that it's an entire big suburb. So that's the only thing, So, but you still could do it where each helps the other get theirs going.
Do you find when you first start off that it's more successful when you have something where people don't have to pay for their own meal? Like, would that be more?
Yes.
Would that be better to start with first?
Yeah. So we try and think, what are the barriers? And cost is one of those barriers. So basically, once you've formed a group, you don't need any formality. You don't need, incorporation or funding or anything like that. But in terms of the first event, when someone chooses to have it at a local restaurant or cafe, you might pick an off meal time. And that way, say if it's morning or afternoon, people can come if they want to have brunch or something, they can. But if they just want to have a coffee or even water, that's totally fine. So we do recommend that rather than lunch, unless you're in a well-to-do area and that'll be fine for everyone. But to cover the bases, I would go an off-peak time. And also, if you do have it in a local cafe, it supports a local business as well. So it's a good thing. It's away from the weather, and it tends to be easier for having a round and people introducing themselves than say a park.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Teresa,
I'm just I heard Beck talk about the support she got from you, Irene, as the Neighbourhood Connect person. So I'm curious to know, what is it what's your role in supporting people, and is there a function, obviously there is, but what's the function of, Neighbourhood Connect in assisting?
Yeah. So we see ourselves as the catalyst to create this movement, which is made up of neighbour groups. So we give a free fortnightly webinar. So that tends to be the main way that we will be able to explain to people how to go about it. And then we also give them a bit of phone and email support after that. So we'll and some things are on the website as well, but it will give them what they need, a contact sheet, an invitation, all of that. And we'll be interested in hearing how it went, and then we'll be inviting them onto the network. So we've listed a whole lot of groups on our network page on our website. So that's how we're trying to build a movement. So we are able to give people some support. We're able to give people more support where we get some funding, which, so someone in the chat put in that question of how are we funded? Well, we get small amounts of project funding from a handful of local governments. So where we get that, we're able to do a workshop, mentoring, and then a post-workshop. So we're able to give a lot more to really help people on the journey, and it makes a big difference. A lot more people will go, see the process through with that greater support. So we absolutely know it's needed. If anyone wants to get involved and help us get that core funding, it's what we need to be able to. We don't want to charge connectors. We want to be able to make this available for everyone, but currently we're mostly run on a voluntary basis, and that makes it just too slow. So, we've got a proven thing that works, but we haven't got the support yet to roll it out. It would be great to do a project that is connected in with a number of disability organisations, but that would need funding to actually give it justice. And I think it'd be a great experiment to have and to work out how best to do that.
Thanks, Irene. We might have to just wind up there because of time. I'd just like to thank Irene and Beck for joining us tonight. Where did she go? You've just moved on me. I'd really like to thank you both very much, not only for, making some time to speak with us, but for that work that you do. And it is intentional work, and it's work from the heart, and it's because we want to know our neighbours. It's not just for ourselves, it's for our neighbours as well. So it's not just about receiving, it's about giving. And I think it's crucial, if we think of people with disabilities as part of our communities, then being part or driving a neighbourhood group that, of course, wasn't just for people with disabilities, but for neighbours. This is a great way for people, to be connected, to reduce their loneliness. But I also heard, and particularly Beck with you, that, the support that you drew from people and other people drew, even when people were dying, the importance of those connections. So I think this is an opportunity here for people, as long as we don't go creating, special neighbourhood groups, that we're talking about all neighbours connecting. So thank you both very much. It was very inspiring. I think my key message from you is that it's intentional. Our connection with neighbours is intentional. So maybe we can all put our hands together and thank Irene and Beck. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. It's been a real pleasure.
Closing slide, graphic text. This video was made possible with the support of an information and capacity building grant through the Department of Social Services, produced by Belonging Matters. Belonging Matters makes every effort to provide accurate and up-to-date material. However, information is subject to change, and our material is for reference only. Logos, talks.matter.net, Belonging Matters.